You know, a topic that always gets everybody's blood pumping. The national conversation. Everybody's really excited about that, right? Okay. Anyway, try and bear with me. I'll try to make our conversation as brief as possible. Then we can go and take questions or something. Okay, I'm going to start. Actually, let me put this down. I'm going to start with a quick run-through about the previous conversations we've had. Because our Singapore conversation, what the thing is called now, is not the first national conversation we've had. We've had at least 3 previous ones. The first one, the next lap, started before any of you were born. So the next lap was in 1991. I need to look at my notes now because I also cannot remember what all these things were about. So in 1991, they decided to have a public consultation about how to make Singapore a nation of distinction in 20 to 30 years' time. They produced a 160-page book that made a whole range of recommendations. The most notable outcomes of this was that schools went to single session, and that they also recommended the setting up of Singapore's 3rd university, which is now SMU. This exercise was so successful in setting out the course for Singapore in 20 to 30 years' time that in just 10 years they decided to do another one called Singapore 21. Of the 3, this one was perhaps the most vague because it didn't really talk a lot about specific policy recommendations. What they tried to tackle at Singapore 21 was what Singapore society should look like. And so they came out with a bunch of broad statements like every Singaporean matters, or we need to have opportunities for all, and have strong families. They came up with 5. I think other than the people involved in it, nobody remembers the 5 today. The 3rd one, Remaking Singapore, was just, as you see, 3 years later. This one, they tried to, what they like to do when they have these things is to slaughter sacred cows. And so there were some suggestions like, we should let jobless people withdraw their CPF before retirement to help them through their unemployment phase. What the Remaking Singapore Committee found was that sacred cows in Singapore are very difficult to slaughter. So in the end, they made 74 suggestions. 60 were accepted. And I think the most notable one, the only thing that people really remember from Remaking Singapore is that they managed to get us a 5-day work week. Okay, now, last year they announced the OSC, the current iteration. This one, unlike, would be the biggest one we've had yet. So, I don't actually know how many people they consulted for the previous 3. But in our Singapore conversation, just in the first phase, in the first 4 months of it, they would talk to at least 5,000 people face-to-face in our Singapore conversation sessions. And they would survey thousands more through social media, through polls on the street and things like that. Unlike the previous 3, which were all led by ministers, this one is led by a committee of 26 people chosen from a diverse range of backgrounds, including like TCS actress Lim Ru Ping. Actually, I've less said about that, the better. And also there was a change a little bit in style. They are talking about engagement versus consultation. Now, what is the difference between engagement and consultation? Consultation involves just everybody sitting down and then I'm collecting feedback from everyone. I'm collecting that feedback, I'm processing it, and then I'm producing some sort of report at the end of it. Engagement, what they're trying to do this time is to try and get people with different views to actually talk to each other. So it's not just I am the person collecting the feedback. I want the people who are providing the feedback to talk to each other. Because they find that people these days at least have a very different point of view on many different things. Like young people tend to talk quite naturally about things that are important to young people. And old people tend to want to talk about things that are important to old people. In the past, I would just collect the info from the young person and collect the info from the old person and try and find something happy in the middle so that the middle-aged people are happy. Now, engagement, I want the young person and the old person to sit together at a table and try and help each other see the different points of view. Now, why do we have to go through this? Why do it this way? These are my reasons, not really their reasons. I see two reasons. The first is the maturing electorate. I tend not to like to make parenting analogies when talking about government, but I'm going to do one here anyway. It's like when you are a parent and your child is small, the child will just do whatever it is you want. You want to go out, you just grab the baby and you go. But when the person becomes a teenager, when he starts to go to Jurong JC, then life becomes more complicated for you. Like say, hey, do you want to follow your mother to the market? Don't want lah, very lazy lah. Then you have to involve the person a little bit more in the decision. Because you cannot just say, hey, let's go this and let's go and do this, let's go and do that. The person is not going to follow you. So, in much the same way, the government now feels it no longer can just decide what is the best thing to do and do it. It must involve the people. Because if they do it that way, people complain. I'll talk about that a little bit when I talk about the nature of policies. The second difference. It used to be in Singapore there was a lot of win-win solutions that the politicians, the leaders were confronted with choices that were quite simple. I do this is good, I do this is bad. Anybody confronted with these kind of options actually has quite a simple job. I'll just do the good one, I will ignore the bad one. But these days, the options that confront our leaders are not so simple. It's not right versus wrong. They'll be confronted with an array of answers. There's right, less right, sort of right. The problem in picking one of these is that whichever one you choose, somebody will say you made the wrong decision. Why didn't you choose the other one? So in order to help make their decisions now, they feel they need to talk more with the citizens so everybody can feel part of the decision, even if the ultimate decision is not one that they agree with. It sounds pretty good so far, right? The OSC. Don't answer that question. But, of course, like any government initiative these days, there's always criticisms. And I'm just going to go through a few quickly, and then we can wrap up. The first criticism that the OSC got right from the beginning is that the opposition was not present. In the 26 people they picked to lead our Singapore Conversation Committee, there were no opposition politicians or opposition voices. So in a sense, it started off with a kind of argument that I'm sure a lot of you have had. They announced their committee, and then the opposition say, hey, Bocio! So they said, hey, we actually didn't want to make a partisan committee, but please, they decided to invite opposition members to attend OSC sessions. And then a lot of opposition members, after being invited, didn't show up, which means which led the OSC to say, hey, you say I bought you already, you never come? The second criticism was that the sessions that they were holding were too open-ended. Because if you attended our Singapore Conversation session, out of curiosity, has anybody here attended one? Okay. I guess there's a problem with our Singapore Conversation also. If you attended a session, you would find that you really could talk about anything you wanted to talk about. There was no limits. You go there, you felt like talk about housing, you could talk about housing. But the fellow next to you wants to talk about cars, he can talk about cars. Another fellow wants to talk about health, he can talk about health. So you go there and people could talk about anything. It was completely open-ended in the first phase. So people say, hey, it feels like I'm talking about too many things. I don't know what will come of this. Which was also the third criticism. From day one, those in charge of the conversation were very careful to try and manage the expectations of what the ultimate result would be of the OSC. They wanted to stress that this was not about creating a new policy. If policy came out of it, sure, they'd be fine, but that was not the aim. The aim was engagement. And so everybody naturally heard this and say, that means you are chickening out. You actually don't want to change anything, so this will ultimately end up in a wayang that doesn't produce anything. Now, I don't know if that will happen. The conversation is still ongoing. The minister has said, though, that in the budget, our Singapore conversation really already made a difference. And for me, I thought the difference was that instead of just telling you what the policy would be, a lot of ministers also set out just broad directions of where they thought the policy should go, and then they invited people to come and talk about it. But I said where this will end up, I don't know. We will have to see, I guess, in August, and then beyond that, what our Singapore conversation will end up with. That's all I have to say to you today. I'm happy to take questions now. Okay, thank you.